There are two basic ways water flows in a stream or riverbed. They are called laminar flow and helical flow. Each is easy to understand and represents vital knowledge to anyone living, working, or playing on or near any waterway. Laminar flow is that water flowing down the center of a smooth-flowing straight river from its bottom to the surface. To understand how it flows, consider this illustration of a stack of plywood sheets separated by layers of rollers. If we were to raise the floor, the stack would begin to move, rolling on the rollers. Let's say the bottom sheet rolls at 1 mile per hour on its rollers. The next sheet up would roll at the 1 mile per hour of the bottom sheet, plus, rolling on its rollers, 1 mile per hour of its own. The third sheet would roll at the 2 miles per hour of the first two sheets, plus 1 mile an hour of its own, or a total of 3 miles per hour. This continues upward until our plywood stack looks like an overhanging snowdrift, each layer of wood moving at the total speed of the layers below, plus 1 mile an hour of its own. This is how water flows down the center of a straight, slow-moving stream. Except the uppermost layer flows slightly slower than the one below because of friction with air. Helical flow occurs along the banks of a river or stream. As the name implies, the water here is flowing in a downstream coil. Water flowing from the laminar flow moves toward the bank along the bottom. As the bank nears, water wells upwards toward the surface, and then outward again toward midstream, where it once again plunges to the bottom and resumes its shoreward journey. This spiraling flow is relatively slow in a sluggish river, more swift and violent in fast-moving water. Here's the danger. A person falling into the water from the bank is drawn steadily outward toward midstream, then pulled downward as the helical flow plunges under. Obviously, a person deposited in midstream from an overturned craft of some sort must battle that downward plunging, outward flowing water to gain safety bankside. We know water has great weight. It therefore must respond to the same laws of inertia and gravity everything else does. When a riverbed turns, most of the water flows to the outermost bank. The outermost helical flow is squashed against the bank, and if the turn is sharp enough, forms a flow not unlike a front-loaded washing machine. This rafter was injured when the helical flow drove her raft into just such a situation. The oar, trapped by a rock wall in the turn, sprang forward, hitting her in the temple. Again, we know water has weight. When water is on the move, its weight has awesome power. Floating debris, trees, and the like can be trapped on the surface in midstream or along banks by rocks or even other trees. Water continues to flow beneath this debris. Anything or anyone floating against the upstream edge can easily be dragged under this pile, then pinned against submerged branches. But floating debris represents only a minor percentage of hazards encountered in river travel. The most picturesque, rapid-flowing rivers seldom flow along smooth beds. Indeed, their beds are usually rocky and irregular. It's interesting that the phenomenon of waves in rivers is exactly opposite the situation found in oceans and lakes or ponds. When the water is at rest, as in a lake, wave energy moves through the water. The wave moves, the water doesn't. In a river, exactly the opposite is true. The water moves, but the waves do not. This is created by water flowing over and around stationary objects on the river's bed. When water flows over a smooth boulder, it is forced upward, higher and higher, until finally it breaks, upstream. If a boulder has a sharp drop-off on its downstream side, a very dangerous situation develops. Water rushing over the boulder plunges off its backside and down to the riverbed. It surfaces rapidly only to rush madly back to the boulder where it plunges under again. This water wheel action creates a situation known to rivermen as a recirculating hole, suck hole, or simply hydraulic. On large recreation rivers like the Colorado, Salmon, and Snake, recirculating holes have been known to capture and hold these giant inflated rafts used for running wild rivers. On our smaller rivers across the nation, canoes, small rafts, and people have met similar fates with deadly results. Even our smallest brooks are not exempt from suck holes. The babbles we hear in a babbling brook are miniature voices of tiny hydraulics, identical to those found on large rivers. When nature creates a recirculating hole, she is kind enough to leave escape routes along the sides. When humans create the same situation, it is usually escape-proof. These low-head dams, found all over the United States, are quite gentle-looking to the untutored eye. In fact, these dams create powerful recirculating holes which stretch from bank to bank. Hundreds of people have lost their lives at the foot of just such dams. To illustrate the danger, here are excerpts from a videotape recorded by a local television station in New York. A tragic death had occurred on the previous day at this Low-Head Dam. Firemen were summoned to rescue what was thought to be a body, but later proved to be nothing but an empty personal flotation device, or PFD. Watch as this boat is first trapped by the hydraulic, then accelerated upstream into the falling water. One fireman manages to grip the engine's lower unit. The other two follow the hydraulic's deadly water wheel, forced under by plunging water, pushed downstream by the current, surfaced 30 to 40 feet downstream, then relentlessly drawn back to the oily slick falls to repeat the process. While two firemen are drowning before hundreds of horrified onlookers, a second boat arrives and attempts rescue exactly as did the first, with exactly the same results. Final tally for the river and its deadly Low-Head Dam: 2 firemen drowned, 3 very lucky firemen taught a very deadly lesson. And of course, the more conventional dams are sources of great potential danger. The problem is, most people don't understand how hydroelectric dams operate. Water to run mighty generators does not flow over a spillway, an obvious source of danger. It can be drawn from the surface of the lake or from deep below the surface. In either case, this violent withdrawal of water creates powerful currents. Whether this suction is powerful enough to drag a boat or even a person under depends on water depth and volume of flow. Such areas are usually marked and certainly to be avoided. But this is true of all dams, piers, and locks for shipping. On even sluggish rivers, water has plenty of power to pin and hold a person firmly against a grate or drain. In farming areas, another hazard to river travel on even gentle streams is fences. Such fences have been known to capsize and pin watercraft, rafts, inner tubes. If the fence is barbed wire, the hazard is even greater. Water pressure can pin a craft or person against any submerged obstruction, like a boulder. Wise river travelers never allow their craft to float sideways to the current. Currents working on a boat's bottom can force an upstream roll and eventual hairpinning on a rock. The best place in a situation like this is at the upstream end of the canoe, where it can act as a buffer between you and obstruction. But keep the craft in line with the current so it can't be caught amidships. A modern aluminum canoe weighs about 70 pounds. When filled, it contains about a ton of water. If the craft is stopped amidships by a rock, the current rapidly turns the canoe into a thick foil wrapper. An unfortunate traveler caught between his craft and a rock is due for injury or death. There is no way to cover every hazard to be encountered on, in, or near rivers. Unless you are knowledgeable about rivers, approach them with extreme caution. While beautiful, they can be quick, relentless, and deadly. But no discussion of rivers and their hazards, however brief, can be concluded without mention of their greatest hazard, flood. Many floods in the United States are predictable. Snow depths, sudden thaw, and spring rain all herald rising water in advance. But the true killer, flash flooding, is most feared. Flash floods roar out of weak earthen dams, over sedimented riverbeds, or through narrow canyon walls. They are formed by tons of water deposited in a matter of hours in a limited area. Often, a flash flood warning is pitifully brief or non-existent. If a warning does come, ignore possessions. Human life may be all that is saved, but it's enough. Lives have been lost saving house pets, memorabilia, and money. A high price for a doll or a dollar. The hazards we've covered so far, while by no means a complete list, is fairly representative and, to a large degree, predictable. By that we mean a sense of self-preservation should arise when any of the warning signs we've illustrated are encountered. Waves, water on the move, gale force storms. But there are times when water offers no obvious warning.